Okay, the way I understand the fifth aggregate vijnana consciousness is that it is I call it the background awareness, or the light of awareness that illuminates the objective field. So what's interesting is that in the layout of the five aggregates, we have, after form, we have feeling, perception, volitional activities, or sankhara, and then consciousness, as though consciousness comes last. But then in the usual formula for the process of cognition, vijnana comes first, so that we have, like in the formula that we looked at this morning, independence on the I and forms, there arises I consciousness. And then, so what I understand I consciousness to be the light of awareness that arises based on the I faculty, illuminating its own particular domain, which is that of visible forms. Okay, then the meeting of consciousness, it says the meeting of these three things is contact. But the way I understand the meeting of those three things, it's not like putting three things together. It's not like putting coffee powder, milk powder, and sugar together to make a cup of coffee. But it's rather that consciousness is meeting the object through the channel of the sense faculty. Okay, and so it's the meeting of those three things, which is called contact. And then out of contact, there arises feeling, perception, and chaitana, which is volition. And so that sequence gives the impression that consciousness is coming first, and then feeling, perception, and volition arising on the basis of consciousness. But actually, at least this is the way it's understood from an Abhidhamma perspective, it's not the case that consciousness occurs first and then feeling, perception, and volition occur later, but those three are always inseparably combined with consciousness. And so I would say the particular function of consciousness is to illuminate, like a light, lighting up the objective field. And consciousness is based on the particular sense faculty. And then the other three factors have more specific functions in the process of cognition, so that Vedana feels, you could say, or experiences the flavor of the object, or the flavor of the contact, whether it's agreeable, disagreeable, or neutral. And then the function of perception, as I said in the morning, its function is to sort of home in on the particular qualities, features, characteristics of the object in order to identify it. And then the function of volition is or its most distinctive function is to respond to the object in some way, to take some kind of action in regard to the object. But even in the most primitive states of experience, there's some volition, even when one is not deliberately deciding to do something. But there's some way of responding to the experience, either by way of liking or disliking. Okay, Stacy. We take the mic.
I thought Buddha said first thing that gets experienced is Vedana, feelings.
There's no place where it says that feeling comes first, but in that particular sequence that we've looked at in the morning, it says that, the meeting of the three is contact. In dependence on contact, there arises feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. So it's not the case that feeling comes before perception and before volition.
I thought there was.
Excuse me?
I thought there's a sutta where Buddha actually says, before we even cognize an object, we have a feeling, or I guess a feeling tone. What did you
I
say?
don't know any
Experience of-
passage like that. I'd have to see it.
Maybe I'm probably wrong then. No, I think I thought there was an actual sutta where where Buddha says feelings is everything, or feelings come, maybe it doesn't say comes first.
I think what it says is that all dhammas converge upon feeling.
Maybe.
Is this a statement that's quoted by Goenka?
No. I thought it was in the suttas, but I don't remember exactly where it was. But I've actually told people feelings comes first, so I'm not going to say that anymore.
Yeah, there is a sutta. Yeah. Okay, so this is a sutta. It's a discussion between a monk named Samidhi and Venerable Sariputta. And it's actually Sariputta is sort of cross-examining the younger monk Samidhi, and he says, on what basis do intentions and thoughts arise in a person? And then Samidhi says, on the basis of nama rupa. Where do they become diversified in relation to the elements? By the elements here, I would think probably it's the sense elements, the element of form, visible form, sound, odor, taste, touch, and mental objects. From where do they originate? They originate from contact. Then it says, upon what do they converge? They converge upon feeling. So that's what's said. But it's not the case that feeling comes before the other things. And this is a very, let's say, a bit enigmatic sutta, so it requires like a lot of interpretation. The meaning is not very explicit. Okay.
Bhante Gunaratana wrote a book about perception, mindfulness, or on perceptions. I think you wrote the foreword to it, and it's how to practice using perception in meditation. You know what I'm talking about? Really? You wrote the foreword for it, I think. It's Meditation on Perception by Bhante Gunaratana.
Oh, by Bhante Gunaratana?
Yeah. It's how to use perception.
Yeah.
And there's 10 perceptions.
Yeah, but there we use the word perception, but that's not referring so much to the particular mental factor of perception as an individual mental factor in the process of cognition. But those call them themes of meditation. So they're called sanya, you could say, but here I would maybe render them as themes or ideas. So it's the anicca sanya, the idea or theme of impermanence, anatta sanya, the idea of non-self. You're wrong.
I think I may have asked this question a long time ago. I don't remember the answer. Is noble one's feeling always neutral?
No, not at all.
So then what forms the foundation of being something feels agreeable or disagreeable for a noble one?
First, like what are the kinds of feelings could a noble, let's even take an arahat. An ordinary person, even a stream enterer or once returner, could even have mental sorrow, mental grief. Like Ananda was a stream enterer, and yet when the Buddha was about to pass away, he was crying like a baby. So he was like very stricken with grief. Okay, let's take an arahat who doesn't feel grief and sorrow anymore, but they'll still feel bodily pain, and then they'll still feel bodily pleasure. So in that case, the feeling is directly, let's say, strongly conditioned by the contact itself. So if it's a contact with something that's painful, if he steps on a thorn, he's going to feel pain in the body. If he cuts himself when shaving, he's going to feel painful feeling. If it's a nice breeze blowing on a cool day or a warm breeze on a cold day, you'll feel pleasant, pleasure. Okay. And then they will feel what's called mental pleasure, somanassa. It could be in the normal state of consciousness when something occurs that makes them feel pleased and happy, and there'll be that mental pleasant feeling. And then when they go into the meditative absorptions, then there'll be this spiritual sukha vedas, a pleasant feeling, the feeling of the jhanas, the 3 lower jhanas. And it's only like from the 4th jhana up that the feeling will be equanimity or neutrality. And then in the case of ordinary contacts, they could actually change the way they experience objects. Actually, we can do the same too, but to a limited extent. So let us say somebody is scolding us and blaming us and criticizing us. So the natural response would be, of course, for anger to arise, and the anger is accompanied by a mental painful feeling, disagreeable feeling. Okay, but if one does a suitable kind of reflection, then one can overcome the anger, and maybe towards the person who's blaming and scolding us, we could develop loving kindness, and then there'll be either a neutral feeling of equanimity, or even a pleasant feeling. So one could change the feeling. And then let us say one is in an extremely pleasant situation, the kind of situation, let us say, okay, a person likes chocolate ice cream, and so somebody serves chocolate ice cream, and so normally the first response in eating the chocolate ice cream is to feel pleasure. And then that pleasure will then become the basis for more attachment. But with suitable mental training, even a little bit of effort, you could just eat the chocolate ice cream, experiencing the pleasant taste of the ice cream, but without the pleasant feeling arising. Just a neutral feeling. Yeah, one gets the pleasant taste, but without that feeling of joy and delight in the chocolate ice cream.
Thank you.
Bhante, you always mention that contact as the meeting of 3 things. You prefer to have another way of saying is the meeting of the object through the sense faculty.
Yeah.
What's the difference between these two? If it's the second way of saying that Bhante prefer, then it has the implication, it seems to me, a permanent consciousness that's
Say again, I'm not quite sure that I catch the point.
first, I don't understand why you have to distinguish the contact as the meeting of three things,
Yeah.
and the meeting, the meeting of consciousness with the sense object through the sense faculty. You prefer the second way of saying it, but first, what's the difference between the two ways of saying it? And second question is, it seems to me in Bante's preference, there is, we would suspect there is a permanent consciousness
I see, it gives
lurking behind.
I see that kind of metaphor. Gives
Right, right.
Yeah, but that's just, I'm using a kind of metaphorical way of explaining. When I say that consciousness meets the object through the sense door, yeah, that's a somewhat metaphorical way of speaking. But what actually takes place is that, okay, the object, let's say the object strikes, the consciousness is always changing at every moment. Okay, so let us say in visible form impinges on the eye faculty. When that happens, then, this is using the Abhidhamma way of thinking, a citta, a state of consciousness arises turning towards that form at the eye door. And in that case, that citta encounters the form through the eye door. That is the moment of contact. But that's just momentary. And then that moment of initial contact is followed by the next moment where consciousness, an eye consciousness, cognizes the object through the eye door. In that moment of consciousness has its own contact. And then there'll be further states of consciousness in the series, further occasions of consciousness. Each of them has its own contact with the object. And so there's distinct states of consciousness arising and falling away, and each state of consciousness has its own concurrent contact as an integral part of that state of consciousness, a factor of that occasion of consciousness. Does that make it clear?
Thank you. And another question is about the papancheti.
Yeah.
You explained that as to expand.
Yeah.
So is that kind of addition to what is really there to expand what is not?
Yeah,
Okay.
that is papancha. Papancha is elaborating upon the object by way of, let us say, the mental predisposition, so that one is projecting onto the object things that originate from within the mind rather than things that are objectively present. And the ideas that are projected through papancha are the ideas of mine, I, and myself. So those are the ideas that are given prominence.
So Bhante, my question is it only in the sense of expansion of what is not there that it's called papancha? If I do not see things as they really are, but I reduced it instead of expanded to increase, but I decrease it, is it included in the sense of papancheti, or papancheti has to be something that is added on? I just like to know the meaning of that word, because that word is widely used in Chinese Buddhism.
Yeah, actually, Shilun, is that what the Chinese?
Yeah. It's rendered as Shilun, but doesn't necessarily applicable.
It's not really so accurate. I think the origins of the word are unclear and uncertain. Yeah, I've seen the different scholars have sort of different interpretations of the origin of the word. But it gives papanchati. Yeah, one would have to look into scholarly studies to find the origin of the word. But the effective meaning, the way it's used in the text. Actually, there was a Sri Lankan monk named Bhikkhu Jnanananda who rendered papancha by the term conceptual proliferation. So this is proliferating concepts, and these have to be like distorted concepts that stray from the actual nature of the object.
Thank you. Bhante, a third question is, when I see a cup and I know this is the cup, so this is the cup, it's from perception
Yeah.
aggregate. Is it for sure from perception aggregate? The aggregate of perception.
Well, in any act of awareness, as I said, all of these mental factors work together. But we could say that within that act of cognition, perception or sanya has the distinctive function of focusing in on the characteristics or qualities of the object as a basis for recognition, future recognition.
In the label, the name of the cup
Yeah.
belongs to the aggregate of perception too, right?
I mean, using the kind of technical Abhidhammic way of explanation, you would say that the label cup is a concept. So it's not part of the perception itself. The perception is the event of identifying. But that which perception uses to identify are the concepts. And the concepts are held to be distinct from the actualities themselves. So like with this that I'm holding, so what is actually here in terms of dhammas would be the property of earth, which is solidity or hardness, the water element, which is the property of cohesion, the heat element, which is the heat intrinsic to this object, and the air element, which is the element of vibration, movement. And then it has color, assume it has taste, and so forth. But then when I designate this as glasses, a pair of glasses, the act of designation is perception, but the term or idea concepts, the idea glasses, that is a concept. So all of the actual elements are conditioned, impermanent, arising and falling away. But the concept is just let's say, a tool of identification and interpretation. So the concept itself, this gets rather complicated. The concept doesn't have an arising and passing away. Its use has an arising and passing away. But the concept of a glass is a kind of glasses is constant. I don't know if that makes sense.
But the concept must belong to aggregate of consciousness.
No.
Because the chitta that contains the four aggregates, if we categorize according to the Abhidhamma, because the chitta, it's a totality with all the chocolates inside. So that chitta, that overall chitta has to, otherwise concept has to be somewhere, right? So if it doesn't belong to any of the four
You're saying the contact?
concepts.
Concept.
Concepts have to be somewhere. For example, in my I don't have the concepts in French, for example.
Yeah.
So there's no way that I can describe a things in French.
Yeah.
So that shows in my chitta, or that chocolate box filled with chocolate, there must be the French chocolate missing. But there must be a chocolate in English there or in Chinese there, so that I am. So what's that chocolate in English belongs to? It has to be in the inside the box of. There must be a space for that chocolate in English to be inside. And where is it? It's not in the four aggregates. As Bande say, it doesn't belong to perception. It doesn't belong to, of course,
It's considered within the Theravada system, the concepts are considered not part of the five aggregates.
but it's inside the chocolate box.
What is the chocolate box?
The chocolate box filled with all kinds of chocolates, but in my box of
The
chocolates.
chocolate box is in the kit, the dining hall.
Where does concepts stay in my mind? Where is the English chocolate stays? And where does my Chinese chocolate? Obviously, there is no French chocolate, right? So where is language, or in broad sense?
I don't know.
But it has to be. The memory belongs to sanya, perception, right?
I say perception makes use of concepts in order to identify, but the concepts are not the perception itself. But this is a rather technical issue, and there have been discussions, detailed technical discussions of this by the Abhidharma sub-commentators, and that's not so fresh in my mind. Maybe it's not so important to know the answers to those questions. Was there a practical reason for?
I have to solve my problem in the introduction
I see.
to my translation. Yeah, because in that sutta it just mentioned the concepts, right? And that I think it's related to linguistics.
Yeah, I would just say that the concepts, the designations, are not part of the five aggregates but this is according to the Theravada commentarial tradition. The suttas themselves don't really discuss the position of concepts, but according to the Theravada commentarial tradition, the concepts are not part of the five aggregates themselves, but they're utilized by the five aggregates, especially the aggregate of perception, in order to identify and ascribe meaning and significance to things. Okay, any further vital questions? Okay, Allison?
Can I go back to the answer you answered, Bo Hui? You are talking about meeting the three is a contact. Meeting three conditions?
Yeah.
Okay, and it is a contact. But then you further down, it says, because of that, there is another contact.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, you use the word, previously, maybe my misunderstanding, uses number 5, the number 5 aggregates, the consciousness, is always the background awareness, is always illuminating when the contact, the meeting 3 happened. So is that illuminating, the words used, is that recreating another contact, another contact, another contact?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to verify with that. Okay, thank you.
Well, when I say that consciousness is what illuminates the experiential field, it's not in Buddhism that the consciousness is like a permanent entity that's always there in the background. But on every occasion or every moment, consciousness is arising again, illuminating the field. So it's arising now, illuminating, now.
Thank you.
But it doesn't have that very specific function the way perception does. Like perception has a more specific function of identifying an object on the basis of its qualities, whereas consciousness seems to be like the light of awareness, which lights up the field of, say, visible forms. And then perception sort of homes in on this particular form and says, that's eyeglasses.
So it's almost like the consciousness is like a magician.
Actually, it's compared to a magician in a sutta, in the Anguttara Nikaya. Consciousness is like a magical illusion. Yeah. Okay, I think maybe, maybe enough for today. Okay, so we could end with 3 half bows to the Buddha.